Well, thank you, Piper. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be in the gallery. I used to own Mountain Arts Collective across the street in Piper. It's been like so amazing to let me in here. And this collection, The Modern Landscape, is kind of a reflection of what I feel like when I used to live here in Tahoe. I really enjoyed my time here and lived in Kings Beach. So this is a lot of the view that I had every day when I went on my little beach walks. This is Kings Beach, Crystal Bay, Incline. You see a lot of East Shore. And when I started this collection, I was focusing more on how to create surrender within structure. I wanted to play with being loose and gestural while having these clean lines that help me kind of contain myself while being loose, and it creates a little bit of an order to the chaos. So I had a lot of fun playing with big handled brushes and these big blobs of paint with bright colors in between these neutrals. And so as a collection, when you look at it all together, it's super bright. But if you get one on its own and you just isolate it, it has bright spots in it and highlights, but it doesn't overpower as much. But I really love them all together. It reminds me of spring. And I like just the feeling of joy. And even though it's bright, it's also really peaceful, which is something that I think reflects a little bit of my personality and how I feel about the lake. When I look at it, I get this inner joy and excitement looking out at the familiar landscape, but at the same time, it's calming, and it kind of brings you home to yourself. And that's something that I really love about Tahoe. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions about the process. I paint in oil. I use all non-toxic colors and mediums. I use lavender essential oil as a thinner. So these colors are hues instead of the actual pigments. I don't use any toxic pigments. I used to work from home exclusively, and I was really afraid of getting any paint on my hands and then exposing that to any of my animals or any children in the house or any other people in the area. So I also didn't want to like make anything toxic in the water. I lived around the creek here in Kings Beach for a long time, and I painted outside a lot. So I just wanted to stay really conscious, and now I get to eat food while I paint and not worry about it and still use oil. And the reason why I never went to acrylic is because the body of oil paint just has this richness to it. And you can see it if you get really up close to these paintings. I have quite a bit of brushwork, but you'll also see palette knife, and you can see just these swaths of paint that you can't get that same texture with acrylic without using mediums that often have a lot of harsh chemicals. So I wanted to stay away from that. A lot of times I'll just use the paint straight out of the tube, mix it up. It looks like butter or frosting, and slap it on there. And that's where this series was born. Really, this was the original painting, the first one that I started with. And when I got in here, you can kind of, if you isolate some areas, you can see just these swaths of paint that have no real meaning other than the feeling behind them, and yet they contribute to the greater whole. And so you can see, okay, this is meant to be snow, but it doesn't, it's not so literal of a translation, and I really enjoy playing with that, so you can kind of let it be what you want it to be, and it's more evoking a feeling rather than telling you what you need to feel. And so when I started with that, I really enjoyed those big spots of color and paint coming off the page so much that I brought it around to the rest of them and focusing on the mountains the most. Yeah. What else to say? Questions?
You start with the sky, you start with the mountains. Where do you
Good
start?
question. Okay, so I start with a thought or a feeling or a memory of the lake, a view of the lake, and I'll just kind of map out a quick composition, so the line work, and then I go into the mountains because that's my favorite spot to start. And that's where this will start first, and that ridge line and getting some of those chunks of color. And once I see what colors kind of came through, because it's not pre-thought, I don't know what color I'm going to do. A lot of times the colors have to change and evolve. And then this top part, that the sky piece comes in, because you want to see, what's going to accent this color the most without taking away, and then bringing it all together. So it could be more cohesive and have a harmony. And I like to kind of keep a really limited palette. I only use about 6 colors. And then I mix them up, so every color that you see on the canvas has a little bit of all the other colors in it. And that's what creates that feeling of cohesiveness. I think if you get too far out there with using different colors, you end up feeling like, why don't they go together? I don't know why. I mean, it's blue and green, and it should look nice together, but for some reason it doesn't have that harmony. So, yeah, that's a long answer to a small question. Does anyone else have a question? Oh, go ahead.
Could you talk about the birds a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the birds kind of came from, they're snowy egrets, by the way. That's kind of the inspiration behind them. Snowy egrets are usually these tall, lanky birds, really awkward, but they're elegant at the same time, which I can really relate to. And so I like to paint these awkward postures that make it peaceful and colorful at the same time. And playing with the outline, again, is creating a structure for what I like to do is chaotic on the inside. And it's kind of a balance and a mirror of what's going on inside of me, trying to balance my own inner masculine and feminine. And I do see my painting process as kind of an extension of my internal process, and which is why it kind of ends up being a little more abstract. Yeah, and the birds, I think, are just the perfect character for being the awkward and yet sophisticated, quirky, and yet, you know, they've got it together kind of thing. Like you identify with them. They have a personality, and each bird kind of has a different personality. I did a whole series, maybe 15 of these guys. So,
how do you pick their names?
Well, okay, so it's really, I look at what they came out to be, and then I think of, who does that remind me of? What's that energy? I know somebody like that. Or I've met somebody where there's a name that I think someone like that would be this way. So this is Wayne, and this is Randy. And so sometimes the names are dated. I do like to use kind of dated names sometimes, like, you know, Wayne or Arlo. Names that you just don't hear anymore. It's kind of fun. And also it kind of mirrors that peaceful feeling. I think of like kind of old-timey, but then they're very modern. So it's always this back and forth, this polarity.
Beautiful. You're darling.
Thank you. And so silly.
So are you living in Tahoe now? You mentioned coming back.
Yes, I'm not living in Tahoe. I'm living in Santa Cruz now, actually. I moved down there about 8 months ago to be with this guy. And yeah, I walked away from Mountain Arts. It was a great spot, but I'm really grateful to be chasing the sun. And I have a studio down there, so I'm painting down there full time. And chasing more of an academic career in art now, looking to be more driven towards how can my work speak to a greater service. So, yeah. And I'll be doing some art retreats as well coming up, so please stay tuned. Also, a lecture here. I don't know if Piper has the flyers ready tonight, but later, I think it's June or July, I'll have to check. But I'll be doing a lecture here and a one-day little art workshop retreat if people want to come and paint with me. So, yeah, stay tuned about that. Piper's newsletter, I'll tell you all about it. Yeah. Any other questions? I think I went way over 10 minutes.
That's good.
That's great, thanks.
Okay. Well, yeah, feel free to come chat with me while I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you a hand, girl.